Welcome to the Pastor's Podcast, Season 7. Season 7, and the reason I say that, the reason why that's important is because our co-host today had her feelings hurt a little bit about the first 6 seasons. But now that we've launched Jesus Culture Leadership Podcast, she's back on Season 7. So, Becky, welcome as a co-host of the Pastor's Podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's great to represent female pastors all over.
I do want to say this as we start every episode. And the reason why I'm going to do the same ad before every episode is because I don't know if would you be something that starts at episode 1 and goes all the way through, or would you pick and choose?
No, you start at episode 1 and go all the way through.
Yes.
But I also skip the intro. So I would skip this. I'm 15 seconds fast forwarding right now.
Wow, that's amazing.
Boring.
I gotta be honest, that hurts a little bit. But the Pastor's Podcast, part of the Jesus Culture Podcast Network, and then this is just a podcast for pastors. We've been doing it for, this is the 7th season, so I don't know how many years that is, a few years. And it's just really just to come alongside pastors, church leaders, and just anybody in the trenches building the local church. But we also have other resources that we do want to make you aware of. Jesus Culture School of Leadership, phenomenal 4-month online. It really will help take your leadership to another level around relational health, around spiritual maturity, around just the skill set of leadership. We've got a ministry track, worship leader track, as well as a marketplace track. You can check that out. And then this podcast, I don't know if this podcast birthed, but this podcast has a similar in-person component, which is our pastors' conference. We do every single year. We do one in the Sacramento area here in January, and we do one in the summer in the UK. Phenomenal times. They're actually some of my favorite times we gather together.
They're incredible.
It begins to feel a little bit like we just come and meet with God, and it feels like we're in the room with like-minded, like-hearted people just going after the same thing.
It's a special place. If you're a pastor, it's a special place.
And there is something about getting in a room with people that are doing the same thing you're doing. Like, we are in the trenches trying to serve God through the building of the local church. And there's something really impactful with that. But Becky, welcome to co-hosting the Pastor's Podcast. This is a podcast we do for pastors.
I'm just glad my application made it through. It's a rigorous interview process. And
yes, but we've relaunched Jesus Culture Leadership Podcast, which is your favorite podcast. Do you like that podcast more than this podcast?
So egotistical. The one that I'm on.
The one that I'm on, so the Jesus Culture Leadership Podcast, where we now just sit and kind of rant and vent about different topics.
It's great. People love it. Tens of people listen.
Isn't it funny how we posted that online and they really are like, I'm part of the 10s and 20s. I had forgotten about 10s and 20s. We used to say at the beginning, we're like, I don't know if there's thousands, but there's 10s and 20s that are listening to this. 10s and 20s of you, and people
awesome.
From the early days were with that. So listen, today we get to interview somebody who's become a really good friend, but somebody who's actually really deeply impacted your own family.
Yeah.
Can you tell that story about Lucy? Because we're going to be interviewing Pete Greig today. Pete Greig is the pastor of Emmaus Rd in, I'm going to butcher the name of the city, but outside of London, and then in England. And then they birthed a worldwide prayer movement called 24/7 Prayer. But those of you that are listening today, you're going to hear somebody who is a brilliant leader, very articulate, but also is just, how would you describe it?
Super down to earth, grounded in humility.
Yes.
And it was fantastic. I think you should have him, this is a, post-production note, you should have him back, and we got to the prayer stuff. He had great leadership stuff, like practical leadership stuff, building movement strategy. When we get into the prayer stuff, we could have gone another hour.
Oh, easy.
Oh, man. And I think we should.
Well, we talked a little bit about that in the interview about the story with Lucy. Tell that story real quick, which is every parent's dream, right?
It's
you know
so
what I'm
true.
saying? Every parent's
Yeah, we read as a church for the summer book club. We went through his book, How to Pray, A Simple Guide for Normal People. And he has a kid component. They did an abbreviated version called How to Pray for Young Explorers. So we said, kids ministry, you're going to go through this book. So we picked up copies for our family. And
let me interrupt real quick. Would you have already fast-forwarded this part?
Yep.
I'm sitting here right now thinking, would you have missed this phenomenal story?
100%.
Really?
Yeah.
Just skip, don't care about your kid.
Yep.
Wow. It's I'm like, if I skipped, I'm going to miss a really great story.
Yeah.
All right, so keep going.
So we read the book for my daughter read the kids version. My husband and I read the adult version, and it teaches you how to pray. It's just really, it's fantastic. And he goes through a model, PRAY: pause, rejoice, ask, yield. God's just doing something with our family in prayer, and that's the whole thing. But we knew we have to teach our kids how to pray, obviously. So my son's 6, my daughter's 11, and so we just walk them through this summer how to pray. And we did it at the dinner table, and we did it at nighttime. He has great practical tools on how to get your kids to pray in the adult version too. It was really good. So we just started to implement it. So we taught him, it takes 2 minutes. Sometimes my 6-year-old, 60 seconds, but we're like, just pray. PRAY. We said it all summer long, and we started, just trying to make a habit of it. And then, school started back up, and we pray every night, but we stopped doing them.
Sure, it was a season of prayer.
Yes, it was a season. So anyway, a couple nights ago, I put her to bed, and she comes out of her bed like 2 hours later. I thought was sleeping. She climbs up in my bed. I said, "What are you doing up?" And she goes, "Well, when I was doing my pray, I got to the A, and I just want to talk to you about it." And I was like, "Wait, hold on. You were doing your pray. What do you mean?" She goes, "Every night I do PRAY." And I was just like, "Oh my gosh."
It's amazing.
She goes, and she just said it so matter of fact, like, why wouldn't I? So, and she'd gotten to her A, which is ask, and it was around she has asthma. And it was around, she's asking the Lord that her asthma would be healed. And so she just opened up this beautiful conversation, 10 o'clock at night, about when we ask God for things, how, and we expect him to answer, and what happens when he doesn't. And then I'm just the whole time I'm pulling tools from the book. He has brilliant stuff on unanswered prayers. His chapter in the book on unanswered prayers is the most, I don't even know how to describe it.
There's a whole book on it called God on Mute.
Yes, and I want to read that because he explains, and that's one of the questions we get, one of the most as a youth pastor. I mean, the kids were constantly, "What? God doesn't answer every prayer. What do you do with unanswered prayers?" And adults even. How he articulated in one chapter unanswered prayers, and he takes you through the Garden of Gethsemane. Oh my gosh, it was so profound. Anyway, it was just so cool, and it is every parent's dream. And we just sat there just so grateful that this little tool that we started using this summer, and how God is so faithful, even where we feel like we failed, we didn't keep doing the habit, or we forgot about it, or we got slack. She has been using, and she's like, "Yeah, I use it every night."
Rad.
So it's awesome.
Isn't it amazing how much when somebody invests in your kid, even like wrote a book, they're just forever endeared to your heart?
Oh, absolutely.
They have, my son was going through a pretty tough time this last year and some basketball stuff. It was a pretty low point for him in an area. He was just really trying to figure some stuff out. And, as a parent, you're just like, I hate seeing my kids struggle like this. And so Josiah DeGuara, who plays for the Jacksonville Jaguars right now, which is Becky, an NFL team, the National Football League, American football. And he was playing for the Green Bay Packers at the time. He's been a longtime family friend. We love Josiah. He was in youth group years ago.
I think I'm responsible for his NFL career.
So Josiah is an amazing guy. But I had reached out to him and said, "Hey, can you connect with Lake?" So he did, and Lake was just out there sitting on FaceTime with him for a while, and Josiah was just encouraging him and just kind of there in that moment for him. And you could tell when Lake came in, he was just lighter. But I think with Josiah now, I'm like, I'm gonna love you forever now.
100%.
I already liked you before. We were already friends before. But I'm like, dude, when you do something for my kids,
yeah. It's so true.
When you helped my kids grow or get to a certain point, I'm just like, dude.
So it's another level.
It's so fun. So
it's cool to share that story with Pete. And honestly, I mean, his book is so simple. It was such a simple approach to prayer, and it's been really transformative for our family.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm excited. We're excited to jump into the interview.
It's a good one.
Well, Pete, it's so great to have you with us. I got to say this right off the bat. I feel like every preacher in England is called Pete now. This is what I've decided. It's like I'm on the phone with Pete Winter and Pete Hughes and Pete Greig. There's all the Petes, but it's great to have you with us on the Pastor's Podcast. First time, I think. I know this has been a real dream of yours. I know it's been a real bucket list moment to be on the Pastor's Podcast.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this moment. It might actually be the climax of my life.
Right.
I don't know. See how it goes.
It's coming on this moment. Hey, Pete, listen, most people would know who you are, what you've done with 24/7 prayer, what you've done with church. But can you just kind of quickly, here's what I'd like to know is, one, can you just share with people what you're doing right now? and then share your journey of becoming a pastor, of kind of coming into the pastorate. Can you kind of share that real quick, and then we'll jump in?
Yeah. So I'm at Portland Church in Bridgetown. We just commissioned the 24/7 prayer room here at this phenomenal church.
Come on.
And this is the start of it's going to sound really pompous and pretentious, but a world tour, because from here it's down to San Francisco for our US national gathering. This is all celebrating 25 years
Wow.
of 24/7 prayer. Then across the Pacific to New Zealand, where we're speaking in 3 different cities. Then back to London via Singapore, do my washing, and then off to Rotterdam in the Netherlands for the European conference. And we got one in Malaysia. So it's just celebrations all around the world of 25 years of 24/7 prayer. So it's kind of a fun time, Banning.
It's incredible. Tell me how you got into 24/7 prayer, and how'd you in particular get into the local church? Because you're an interesting guy, because you have that kind of parachurch. I wouldn't necessarily call it a parachurch, but that kind of parachurch ministry organization. The statistics, I say stats, but I'm saying what you're doing around the world with 24/7 prayer, when you really sit down and start unpacking it, it's pretty profound and worldwide, and the impact is pretty crazy. How'd you get into the pastorate?
Well, it's kind of the other way around. All I've ever wanted to do was be a pastor, and that's what I still am. I think the moment someone gets on an airplane, they turn into an expert. but just back home,
It's true.
No one takes you that seriously, and that's good. And by the way, it's really easy to teach things in other countries and other contexts. They sound good, they preach well, but they just don't really work at home, or they were working 6 months ago, but things have moved on. So I think, the Church of Jesus Christ, George Eldon Ladd, who was a great Pentecostal theologian, said, the church is the primary agency of the kingdom of God. So the kingdom of God is bigger than the church, but the church is like the primary agency. So, I don't really believe in parachurch. I just believe in the local church, and I believe in the worldwide Church of Jesus Christ. And, and the backstory of the 24/7 movement is we were one local church who realized prayer is the key to everything, and we were bad at it. And so we started a prayer room just to try and learn how to pray. And then that went viral. And so now, we're in over half the nations on earth. But I'm still like the pastor of a local church.
When I'm with you, and I don't just say this because you're a guest on the podcast, there's few guys that really kind of probably inspire me and provoke me. So I'm around guys that I'm impressed by what they're doing. I love what they're doing, but I'm not necessarily like provoked or stirred by it or inspired by it. When I get around you and I hear what you're doing, I hear the vision, I hear about Waverly Abbey, which you can maybe tell us about, I hear about the church you're doing, I hear what you're dreaming about, I hear about your team, I hear where you're going. I really am like just inspired. I come home going like, I got to dream bigger. I got to take bigger risks. I've got to step out a little bit more. But also this intriguing kind of way that you do it, which feels, I know it's intentional because leadership's intentional, but half of what you're doing feels like, I know it's not, like you kind of, I don't know, we just fell into it and it was kind of a group of us friends and here we are. And you've somehow kept this, it's a very intriguing thing. And I don't know if this is intentional on your part, if it's just kind of really how you do it, but it feels so organic and so relational and so authentic and so like we were just following the Lord and kind of ended up here. But also, you can't have a worldwide organization. You can't lead a church, have an organization, have all the things you're doing without some real level of intentionality and purpose and strategy and vision behind it. You're taking massive risks that when you talk to you, it doesn't sound like they're massive risks, but when you really, I'm like, that's a huge risk you're taking right there. Can you unpack for us that leadership, personality, style, strategy? I don't even know what it is or how I would ask that question about that. Doing great things for God, doing big things for God, but also just kind of, we're just with some friends and just kind of following the Lord, and here's where we ended up.
Well, it's really kind of you to say that, and thank you. And, the feelings are mutual. When I get around you, I'm challenged and inspired and all of the above. I think, we make a lot of mistakes. we get a lot of things wrong. But we are still here, quarter of a century later. We are still friends. We've lost very few people. And we're still, for the most part, having fun. We've been through our share of really difficult things. I think, there is quite a lot more thinking behind it than people sometimes realize. There's quite a strong level of intentionality, and these are some principles that anyone can apply in any form of local church or international church ministry. The first thing is this, I call it the 10% principle. The lie that you very quickly will start to believe is that you're in control of your life and you're in control of your ministry, you're in control of your organization. It's absolute lie. 90% of all our lives are out of our control, right? I mean, things can happen, God forbid, but later today, one of us could have a car accident, or a stranger could hand us $1 million. I mean, just life is out of control. And we don't want to live with that sense of chaos. It's terrifying to us. So we become control freaks. Now, if we can just work out what are the 10% of things in my life that I'm actually in control of, like I really can control these things, or what are the 10% of things in my organization that I really can control, that will enable us to sustainably live, make a valuable contribution, and it will help us to cope with the 90% that we can't. So I'll give you some examples. Investing into my own prayer life means that I am better postured to deal with whatever chaos life may throw at me later today or next month or whatever. With friendships, if what you do is half successful, you'll quickly find lots and lots of people want to have coffee with you. And the risk is that you're constantly with people, but your relationships are a mile wide and an inch deep, right? And you start to get lonely for your real friends. Like they're the ones who'll be going, oh no, I know you're busy, don't worry. And you end up going like a year without seeing them. And so prioritizing real friendships in order to be a healthy human being, whilst you're having coffees with lots of relative strangers who will probably tell you that you're great. I think with your finances, there are things you can actually attend to with your finances and how you handle those, and savings and giving, that enable you to deal with inflation and the chaos of the markets, and who knows what else. You might become very rich and it might blow you up. You might lose everything and it might bring you down. But there are things that you can attend to with your health. There are things you can control in terms of your personal fitness. But then there are obviously other things that you can't. Just illnesses can come to you. So this is what I'm trying to say is work out what is the 10% of your life that you really can control, and focus on that, and be pretty ruthless in ignoring the other 90%, and accept that you're not really that much in control. That frees you up more than I can possibly tell you if you just prioritize the things that you are responsible for and in control of. And almost no pastors do that. They deep down feel responsible for everyone and everything. And to put it a different way, it's like the difference between your resume virtues and your eulogy virtues. So your resume virtues, those are the skills that you develop, that you monetize, that give you any form of success, that help you get on in life. And then your eulogy virtues, those are the things about you that they'll say about you at your funeral. Everybody knows that your eulogy virtues are more important than your resume virtues, but most people spend most of their time focusing on their resume virtues. So I want to just say, focus on your eulogy virtues. Focus on the things you can control. Focus on the kind of person you're becoming, and not on the things you're trying to achieve. And you might end up leading something really big or really small, but it doesn't really matter because it'll be healthy and you'll be happy.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
It's so good. As you were talking, I think it's probably the same, I'd say, in your part of the world as it is in America. I think it's just culture today It's almost like the pressure leaders feel to be an expert at everything. You've got to be top in your, like it's like...
You have to be a phenomenal counselor, phenomenal preacher, phenomenal world expositor.
Yes, you have to be strategic. You have to also be fit and healthy. You have to also be a personal trainer.
Yes.
You have to be a monk.
You have to be an entrepreneur.
A theologian.
You got to have some side businesses.
You have to be a millionaire. It's like, and so as you're talking, I'm going, oh man, the pressure, even for me, that I feel I've got to be top notch in every single thing, which is just not possible. It's not realistic.
Yeah. And you'll burn out. And also the kind of people who will then try and be that probably have a really unhealthy relationship with their own ego. Yeah. So it will attract people who kind of deep down think they're phenomenal at everything, which isn't really the kind of leaders that we need or want. I love, for a while I was one of the leaders of a church in London called HTB that became famous for the Alpha course. Literally millions that come to know Jesus through it. And two little stories from there that speak into this. One was the former vicar, the pastor at HTB, was a guy called Sandy Miller. And he was pretty busy. It was a really big church. He was a high-profile church leader. And someone was walking across the parking lot. I met him one day and said, any chance I could get a coffee with you sometime? And Sandy just said, when would you like to? And the person said, well, you must be terribly busy. When would work? And Sandy apparently opened his, he had a diary, like on old school, on paper. He opened it and he held it up. He said, I've got literally nothing to do this week. Just write in wherever you'd like to see me. Now, I don't know what that was. I know for a fact that he would have had a lot of things in his schedule, but he, instead of trying to show off about how busy he was, He was making himself radically available. And then the other story from there, which I love, is I talked to one of the AV guys, one of the sound engineers once, and he said one time, Nicky Gumbel, who then succeeded Sandy Miller.
Also a legend.
He is a legend.
Yeah.
He really is. So Nicky was wearing the tie mic, and he was out in the back room in the church of England. They call it a vestry, but in America you call it the green room, getting ready to come on and preach. And he didn't know his mic was on, so the guy on the sound desk could hear him in the green room, and he was on his own, and he heard Nicky Gumbel pray.
Oh wow!
And this is what he heard. This man saying, Nicky was saying, "Oh God, I'm terrible at preaching. I hate this. I don't know why you asked me to do it. Lord, would you help me once again?" That was his prayer.
Oh, jeez.
Like this guy who's literally, he's preached at all the biggest conferences. He's preached in the Royal Albert Hall. And that he's alone with his maker talking like that. And I just think those are the kind of leaders who aren't trying to be good at everything. Yeah. They're kind of in touch with themselves, that lead much better.
That answers your question, I think.
Answers my question right there. One of the main things I see with pastors is trying to figure out who to meet with and who not to meet with. Like the pressure, like just practically the pressure you feel.
Do you need some mentoring right now,
Yeah,
Banning?
absolutely. Will you mentor me, Pete? Honestly, how do you, as somebody who has a family, somebody who you're traveling all over, you got a ministry, but you also are very authentic, very relatable, very accessible. These are people in your church. Yeah. Like you want to also kind of stay in touch a little bit, but also, I can give the practical reasons why, hey, you need to meet with a small group leader, you need to meet with another pastor. I can't meet with everybody in the church unless that's all I would ever be doing and not even get that done this year, that type of stuff. How do you navigate that? Like when I talk to people, I genuinely care. I genuinely am for them, and we're kind. You know what I'm saying? So we're not aloof. I'm out in the middle of services or whatever else talking. We're not aloof, but then it kind of leads to, you almost sometimes go, I just want to be more aloof so people just don't ask. How do you navigate that, and how do you determine kind of what you do?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it's really an important one. Here's how I do it. It's going to sound a little weird, but track with me here.
Your English, we just automatically accept that.
Thank you. In town planning, okay? If you're trying to design an entire new community as an architect, they know that to sustainable human living, you have to have four spaces. You have to have public space, social space, personal space, and private space. Okay, so public space might be a park or a highway. Social space might be a gym or a cinema. Personal space might be your own home, and private space might it's probably your bedroom, your toilet, whatever. And so you've got to have all four of those for healthy human living. And I found that quite a helpful distinction. And this also affects the way I handle myself with social media as well. Because one of the problems we've got is people don't differentiate what kind of relational negotiation I'm going into. And it's profoundly different if you're talking to someone who's in public space than someone who's maybe coming to your personal space. It's different what you communicate, how you posture yourself, and what level of availability you give. And so my basic principle is I try to be as available as possible in the public space, but I put limits on it. I don't respond to, all the messages on social media. I just can't. People send me things on Messenger. I just don't look at them. Why should I? I've never promised to do that. But for example, I preached last night here. I always make a point of sitting at the front at the end of the meeting, so anyone who wants to come and talk to me can, because I feel like if I'm going to preach to people, I should be available to talk to them and speak to them as real people. Now, I limit that. Last night I was going out for a meal, and after probably talking about half an hour to different people, praying for some people, a couple of them weeping, it was like I've now just got to walk out the building. But that's public space, and I want to be as available as possible. There are limits. Now, clearly, private space, the other extreme, is me and God and my wife. So people aren't going to get access there. So the real complexities and what you're really asking about are not a public space or private space, but personal and social space. Social space might be members of your own church. They're not just strangers. You're in community with them. And with members of my church, all of them can have access to me once. But I will pretty much try and pass them on to somebody else who will bluntly be able to help them better than I can. Very occasionally, I just met with someone a couple of weeks ago. I think they're brilliant. I just want to mentor them for a bit. But that's kind of exceptional. There's a real limit to how many of those I can do, because I think it's important they have access to me. And quite often I'll bring someone else in on the meeting because I'm going to pass the ball down the line to that person. And also sometimes, I differentiate between let's have a meal together, let's have a coffee together, or let's have a quick chat at the end of church. I mean, those are all different levels of commitment. And then, personal space, that's the people I know are my friends. And they have very good, access to me. I will prioritize time with them. I will go after them. They're the people I'll be like, hey, let's hang out tonight. Do you want to come around my house? I'll phone them up just to find out how they're doing. So I hope that doesn't sound too clinical, but I do make those distinctions. And I wish more people did, because I watch people, especially on social media, who've got no filter between private, personal, social, and public. And they are saying things that are only appropriate for their private or maybe their personal space in what is fundamentally a public space. And it's just not appropriate.
It's interesting, Becky, because on social media too, what you're saying, pastors feel obligated. So there's a whole new way to reach out to somebody. Mm-hmm. So there's a whole new way to reach out, and we just feel. He said, "I just don't respond to him. I don't even know you." Yeah. Like we feel obligated to have to kind of respond unless you're kind of a jerk or whatever.
Yeah, it is. That's a fascinating example. I love that. It's so practical too. And I think if just even the permission and the distinction to say these are 4 separate spaces that require 4 different boundaries and 4 different contexts, and that's required for healthy human connection and living. I think if we could if we're doing it as leaders, then we could also help our people, which I think people are bad at that. Yeah. I think that's why, relationship dynamics.
We're actually saying, I'm doing this, and I think you should be doing this.
100%. Because often what they're reaching out for is what I have found when people are wanting to meet, they don't have connection. They're lacking, in community. And so they're reaching out to the lead pastor saying, will you be my community and my connection? And reality, you don't have these spaces. So
yes. Becky has a story about her daughter, Lucy, who's just wonderful, 11 years old, and how, because they read your book, she's beginning to pray on her own. Her mom, Becky's walking in on her, praying on her own and this type of stuff. Can you talk about the importance real quick about actually having longevity as one of your goals? Like, I don't know, 25 years ago, you guys are celebrating 25 years of 24/7 prayer around the world. Did you have that goal? Is it when you're looking back, you thought in 25 years there's going to be an 11-year-old girl that begins to learn how to pray because of what we're doing?
Yeah. Oh, that I just love hearing that about your 11-year-old daughter, Becky. And that's the stuff that really counts, an 11-year-old growing in her relationship with God, with prayer. In a world like ours where we don't really know what the future holds, it's back to that 10% principle, right? We don't really know what the future holds for our children, for the next generation. But we do know that if they know how to connect with God, whatever happens, good, bad, and ugly, they're kind of going to be okay. So that's just stunning. Thank you for that encouragement. Longevity, I think, Banning, no, we absolutely never set out to do 25 years. In fact, our initial thing was one prayer room. We wanted to try and do 1 month of night and day prayer. And no one at that time in the Western world was doing that. You had to go to South Korea for it. So it was a big deal. But I figured if we could only manage 1 week, that would be more praying than we'd ever done before. So that was the initial impetus. And then that month turned into 3 months. We just couldn't stop. Too many miracles happening, too amazing things. And then it spread, and we thought, I think we might fill the whole of the year 2000 with prayer, which was off the charts insane. And then, in the early days, give you a sense of how punk rock it was. We used to gather our leaders once a year somewhere. And basically, if we knew someone in a nation, they became our national director. We later found out most of them were totally unable, unqualified to be national directors of anything. But anyway, that's just our friends.
Banning, were you a national director?
Totally.
Banning, if we'd known you, we'd had you.
Think about where you'd be.
And we used to get together, and everyone resigned. Every year, we all resigned. We quit and said, God, are you going to rehire us? And we had the most terrifying night where we would wait and see if the Holy Spirit rehired us. And we also used to every year look at the vision that God had given us and say, do we still want to die for this? Because if not, let's think up something else we can do for God. Because we really enjoyed being together. And then we did that for a number of years. And people did resign. Some people didn't get rehired by God. It was terrifying. And then what happened was some guys came to us and said, listen, we're about to sign a 5-year lease on a building. So this whole we'll stop when God does thing is doing our heads in, because if you stop next year and we got a 5-year lease, we don't know what to do. And so we began to realize as we grew and as we became a bit more organized, that model wasn't healthy, but I actually think the posture of the heart probably is a good one to maintain. And I think at the heart of it, Banning, it is, everyone now wants to call their thing a movement. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked, especially in America, how to start a movement.
Hey, easy.
I kind of feel like saying, if you're trying to start a movement, it's not a movement. It's just a program. It's an idea you had that you want to call a movement. That's not a movement. If it's a spiritual movement, it's God.
Yes,
and
agreed.
That's why I call myself the bewildered founder. I've been bewildered for a quarter century. Can you imagine what that feels like? I remember the realizing that 24/7 was getting big in North Carolina, in Charlotte, North Carolina. And someone there seemed to be stealing all of our stuff. And we don't know who they were. And so eventually we thought we'd better go and find out. We got in touch with this girl called Lisa Kuntz. And Lisa said, I was planning a church, but then I went into a season of prayer and fasting, and God gave me an open vision in which I was walking toward this fire. I entered a room and I saw the words prayer, mission, and justice written up. So I Googled it, and prayer, mission, and justice is the slogan of 24/7 prayer. I'd never heard of you guys. So I looked at it, realized God's calling me to do it. So I've been running a 24/7 prayer room in Charlotte, North Carolina ever since, because God commissioned me to do it. I'm so sorry. Was there a box I was meant to tick?
Oh my
we kind of
gosh.
went, okay, no worries. This is great. You're us in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Wow.
And so there are stories like that going back year after year, month after month, where we realize God is doing this. And the way we put it is, we don't make waves, we surf waves. And one of these days, Banning, I very much hope the wave will stop, and that will just leave us on a beach, sunbathing, drinking pina coladas. Yeah. That's the dream. But what's happened is the waves just keep coming. And by the way, surfing waves is far more fun than making waves. Making waves is just exhausting. So no, we're like Forrest Gump. We just been bumbling along, and one thing just keeps leading to another, and here we are.
See, the crazy part for this, and I want to talk about prayer. The crazy part for me is sometimes you hear guys say that, but it's kind of more self-effacing, kind of just trying to be humble and, we just whatever. But you're like, okay, I think there's a lot, but I actually believe it with you. You're actually like, I actually think that's what happened.
Amazing.
Like, you're just like, should we do this again another year? Should we do this again another year? And kind of here we are. And I don't know, it just resonates with me. It does take some of that striving, takes all that striving. Not the work, like there's real work, but that striving that comes in what we're trying to do just kind of feels like it removes it.
I don't think you can strive for a quarter of a century.
No, yeah.
Yeah, we I don't want to give a false idea, because we do, it is the posture of our heart, and some of that's just my own bioenergetics. I'd like an easy life. I never felt the need to be famous or successful or anything like that. My older brother, who's a lawyer, still says, "Have you got a job yet?" when I see him. So that's the way I've always related to the hobbits. Like, let's find my friends and go on an adventure. The two drives in me are friendship and adventure. And if I'm just with friends who have no vision to do anything whatsoever, I kind of get bored of them, because I'm the guy who, after a couple of drinks, is like, "Hey, let's go and do something." But then equally, if I'm with just like A-type, caffeine-fueled visionaries who are just like super ambitious and they're never up for just a laugh, I just find those people exhausting. So I'm like a hobbit, and maybe we'll succeed, maybe we'll fail, but let's at least have a story to tell at each other's funerals. So that's how I'm wired. So maybe that. But listen, here's the false impression that I must redress. We do work really hard.
Yeah.
And we are intentional about responding to what we sense the Spirit is saying and doing. And yeah, I'm one of the hardest working people I know. I mean, I really am. And I'm not proud of that. I'm kind of constantly trying to change that. The other thing I want to say is governance really matters. Because what I've described is the very anarchic early days of the movement. But if there's anything that recent years have shown us, it's the importance of a good board, of good accountability, of putting the right people in place, of addressing finances, and so on. And eventually, Banning, after a number of years, I realized I'm not a bad, I'd started something, and then by default, you end up as the CEO, which was not something I ever wanted or trained for. And I wasn't a bad enough CEO for them to fire me, but I wasn't great at it, and it wasn't really what I, wanted to do. And so I passed the executive leadership of 24/7. We would talk about the movement and the organization. The movement's just wild and out of control. The organization is like the engine at the heart of it. If you like, it's a surfboard that we're on. So I put someone in charge as an executive of the organization, and it's a pretty serious moment. And then I went and got some coaching, and I said, prepare me to be the face of a bunch of decisions I disagree with, because that's what's about to happen. And help me. I did 360s and all the rest of it around that. And that's been so liberating, because other people now are in charge of fundraising, developing resources, building apps, running events, just HR, just all that stuff, which is killing me. It's really important, but it's not what I'm going to do. And I just stay in charge of high-level strategy, theology, culture, mentoring a few leaders, and all of that. So, that's how we've played it.
Well, with the time that we have remaining, just to honor the space, I'd love to talk about prayer and the culture of prayer. I read your book, How to Pray, A Simple Guide for Normal People. I love that. Banning says I have to read the other one. What is it?
Oh, Red Moon Rising.
Red Moon Rising.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's
And there's How to Hear God, a simple guide for normal people as well, Becky.
Oh, I need to listen to that or read that one too. I love just the way that you break it down so simply. Oh my gosh, you've just, for us personally, which this isn't the question, but for anybody listening, it demystifies prayer. It's so good for families. You have a kids version, which is phenomenal. Oh my gosh, my kids ate it up. My 6-year-old, we walked my 6-year-old through it. They had so much fun with it. It's just so incredible. It's been a gift to my family. We took our entire kids ministry. We did, I don't know if you ever saw it. We actually just took the brand of that book, The Explorers, and we made a whole camping theme. It was wilderness. We went, all of our
Wow.
kids ministry took them through the kids book all summer long and taught them the model. It was fantastic.
That sounds awesome.
So talk a little bit about, obviously as pastors and leaders, we know the importance of prayer and the life of prayer that Jesus modeled to us, but it can be, I feel like an uphill battle to establish cultures of prayer within our churches. I mean, I don't think, every church preaches the word, every church worships. I don't know that every church has a prayer room. I'd love to talk about that. Do you think, that's vital, the necessity of that? But can you talk a little bit about what advice would you give to pastors and leaders of church communities on establishing a culture of prayer within your church? I think the personal prayer life is important. I don't know if we have time to get into both of that, so I'd love to focus on the culture of prayer within our churches. It's
such a big question because there's only about 3 things that all churches really have to do, and prayer is one of them. And yet we trust in programs, brands, personalities, platforms, more than that. So, our great mission is, how do we call the Church of Jesus Christ back to Jesus Christ? That's what prayer is, okay? So, I think the first comment is this. We all now have, say, a big budget for worship, music. Even though the Bible talks about prayer more than musical worship, we spend crazy money buying the kit, writing the songs, learning the songs, hiring worship pastors, lyrics on screens. And so our worship life, and I'm grateful for that stuff. And Jesus culture is at the forefront of that. And our worship life isn't just this thing God kind of sneezed and it happened. We are highly intentional about it. Unfortunately, prayer doesn't get the same budget. It doesn't get the same leadership. It doesn't get the same creativity. And then we wonder why it struggles.
Wow.
And part of the reason is that about 40, 50 years ago, they developed a way of monetizing worship.
Yep.
Which they never have done for prayer, which might be a good thing. Sorry if I'm being challenging here, but
it's a very good thing.
Is there any other area of your life you want to see thrive, your church life you want to see thrive, that you have zero budget for? And people say, well, I wouldn't know what to spend money on prayer. Well, there we have the problem. Hire a prayer leader, for starters, just like you'd hire a worship leader. And by the way, that isn't the old lady who prays a lot. She'll be the one at all the prayer meetings. What you want is a leader. It's much easier to get a leader praying than a praying person leading. A lot of the real praying people don't know how to lead anyone. They're just mystics. They're wild-eyed. No one will follow them anywhere. They're wonderful people. But you want leaders, and you want to look them between the eye and say, you need to follow the way of Jesus, who regularly stayed up all night praying. Prayer was undoubtedly the key to his ministry. That's where he got all his strategy from. You can trace it through the Gospels.
Yep.
That every single time after Jesus spends a night in prayer, he moves in greater authority and power. Who knew? Jesus has times he moves in more power and more revelation. He does after his times of prayer. We need to look at the Acts of the Apostles, the early church, who, when things got busy, delegated administration away in order to prioritize 2 things, prayer and the word. And their church was growing to multiple thousands without email. So there is something here. So there's, I've written various books that can help people with different resources. The prayer course will help churches to learn to understand prayer. That prayer course is free. It's online. It's available at prayercourse.org. We've had 3 million people do it so far. But that partners with the How to Pray God. So that's an equipping tool. Prayer rooms really work. And again, we teach people how to do that. So budget for it. And here's what I would say. It's a 4-step process for building a culture of prayer in your church. Firstly, model it. We as leaders have to model it. This is not something we can delegate to someone else. This is caught, not taught. And so radically prioritize prayer in your own life and talk about it. Like, don't just have it as a private thing. Don't be too humble about it. Talk about your prayer life. And the primary privilege of being a pastor is no one is going to object if you were to say, I want to spend the first hour of my working day every day of the week in prayer. No one. If you say, I want to have a retreat with God once a term, no one's going to object to it. It's an incredible privilege, and you should be doing it. And so, and by the way, if you don't want to do that and you don't enjoy that, then you shouldn't be in Christian leadership. Like, right there. Your personal intimacy with Jesus is where your entire credibility and authority flows from. And so I am being challenging, but some people will roll out a program and hire people without modeling it themselves. So that's the first thing, model it. Secondly, teach it. This might sound obvious, but prayer is on every page of the Bible. And yet what most churches do is they might have a teaching series on prayer once a year if you're lucky. And it seems to me that we should be teaching prayer to our church regularly, without any kind of, apology, and weaving prayer into what we're teaching. By the way, that isn't just, a simplistic thing, because, of course, there are many ways of praying. Teaching, I was here at Bridgetown, I was teaching about spiritual warfare, travail, and intercession yesterday. You might be teaching on contemplative prayer, meditation. You should be teaching on unanswered prayer. Listen, if we're not honest, as honest as the Bible is about unanswered prayer, then don't be surprised when people don't really trust us. So we've got to tool people up in their personal relationship with God and prayer. So teach on it. And also part of teaching on it is testimony. If you stand in front of your church and say, who here has ever seen a genuine miraculous answer to prayer? Every single time you do that, someone will put their hand up. And if you say, come and tell us the story, people will be inspired to want to pray.
Yes.
And so that faith comes through hearing, fueling up people's prayers with the fact that it does work. So model it, teach it. Then the next thing is institutionalize it. You have to, if you're going to build a culture in your church, you have to institutionalize it. That means you need to find models that work. You need to put budget around those. You need to put sustainable rhythms in place. Here at Bridgetown, we just launched a 40-day season of night and day prayer, but it will end after 40 days. And then the church will have a breather, and then it'll pick up the baton, and in the future, it'll go into another season of prayer. So build rhythms, find working models, put budget around it. And then the final thing is, so you model it, you teach it, you institutionalize it, and then you celebrate it. You need to regularly be taking what God is doing through prayer in your church and telling the stories, because that is what keeps people alive. It stops it being a religious duty and becomes actually a source of great joy. So those would be some of the principles for building a culture of prayer in your church.
There's the masterclass right there.
Wow.
I know.
Sorry, it's a bit long.
Go get to work. I have to go do some of that.
No, it's exactly
fantastic.
what we're looking for. And I think that any of the pastors, church leaders listening to this stuff, this is what is just so helpful, is actually hearing the heart behind it, the why behind it, but also the practicality and the how of this thing. So,
yeah,
Pete, I sure appreciate you taking time. I know you're in the middle of a world tour. Do you have a T-shirt? Do you have like a T-shirt, the World Tour T-shirt that's got all the cities listed out and everything that you're wearing, like the concert tours?
I should get them. I will say this, Banning. I've been wearing the Jesus Culture sweatshirt that you gave me all summer.
It's fantastic.
It's so cool.
It's fantastic.
It's really nice.
We'll make sure we get you a percentage of some royalty somewhere. Pete, thanks so much for jumping on. Seriously, so rich, so good, so grateful, and we're with you in what you guys are doing around the world. We're just so for it. So thanks for jumping on.
Banning, let me just say, John Tyson puts it like this. We've only got two choices as pastors. We can either manage decline right now, or we can believe for more.
Come on.
And there there has to be more for our
Yes.
communities, more of discipleship, more of the signs and wonders we're longing to see, more supernatural. There has to be more. And that means that we have no option but to push into prayer right now, because our programs can't make that stuff happen.
Yeah.
And so that's why I wanted to encourage everyone listening to this. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for the sacrifices that you make. But I really want to encourage you, push into prayer, because there is so much more that God has got for you.
There it is. How do they connect with you? How do they find out? How do they get a personal lunch with you? I'm kidding. Come on now. How do they connect? Instagram, websites? Where do they find all the books?
Yeah, well, the books are on Amazon. But I mean, the key books are, the story that will set your hair on fire with Power of Prayer, Red Moon Rising, and Dirty Glory.
Yep.
The equipping books that will really help you and your community grow are How to Pray, a Simple Guide for Normal People, with a free prayer course attached for small groups. How to Hear God, a Simple Guide for Normal People, which again has a course attached to it. And then really importantly, there's a book called God on Mute, Engaging the Silence of Unanswered Prayer, which is helping people to process the painful stuff. And I have lost count of the number of people who said that stopped me quitting my faith or brought me back to faith in Jesus.
Good.
So the books are all out there. We do a daily devotional app called Lectio 365, Lectio, Lectio 365. We got 300,000 daily users on that now.
It's incredible.
And I don't know how many languages it's in. So people can check out Lectio 365 as well. And then, just follow me on social and all the usual stuff.
Perfect. We'll do it again. Thank you, Pete. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Banning. Thanks, Becky. God bless you.
Well, we told you it was going to be good, and I feel like I say this all the time, but I think I just do this podcast so I can just sit and, these guys are friends too, right? We're not really bringing in people that aren't necessarily friends, but I just sit and listen to these guys talk about prayer, talk about leadership, talk about spiritual formation, talk about
those 4 spaces. That'll stick
just
with me.
Phenomenal.
So
and
good.
the way that these guys are able to articulate kind of both the why and the how, and I just go away going, man, I feel like I'm a better pastor and leader from that 40-minute conversation with you.
Absolutely.
So I absolutely love it. So guys, listen, I know I say every episode, make sure you like it, make sure you comment, but it really does help just kind of get this message out there a little bit more when you do that, and all the algorithms or whatever else, however all this stuff works. So make sure you do that. And then guys, Jesus Culture School Leadership, Pastors Conference, Sacramento, UK. We'd love to see you there and hang out. So we'll do it again.